There's a single weekend in 1971 that quietly rewrote the meaning of every dollar, pound, and coin on Earth. A handful of powerful men disappeared into a secret retreat for 2 days. They told almost no one. And they came out having cut money loose from the one thing that had anchored it for centuries: gold. By Sunday night, it was announced to the public, wrapped in calm, technical language designed not to alarm anyone. It worked. Hardly anyone panicked, because hardly anyone understood what had just happened. What they'd actually done was sever money from its anchor and replace that anchor with something far stranger and far more fragile than gold. We are all still living on the other side of that weekend, and most people have never even heard of it. August 1971. The United States has a problem it's been hiding for years. It has promised the world that every dollar can be exchanged for gold, real gold, on demand. But there isn't enough gold, not even close. Other countries have started to notice, and one by one, they begin showing up, asking to trade their paper dollars for the metal. America swore was behind them. The vaults are draining. The promise is about to break in public, so that weekend, President Nixon takes a small group of his most trusted advisors to Camp David, in secret, no press, no announcement. 2 days to decide what to do about a lie that's about to be exposed. And to this day, almost no one alive can tell you what was really said in that room. The decision they reach is breathtakingly simple. Stop honoring the promise. Close the gold window. Tell the world the dollar is no longer redeemable for anything at all. Sunday night, Nixon goes on television and tells the American people it is temporary. A measure to protect the dollar from speculators. Nothing to fear. That was more than 50 years ago. It was never reversed. It was never meant to be. So, the real question isn't what they decided that weekend. It's why they called it temporary when they knew it was forever, and what it quietly did to every dollar you would ever earn after. To understand the panic in that room, you have to understand the promise that was breaking. It was made in 1944, in a New Hampshire town called Bretton Woods, as the world planned for life after the war. The deal was elegant. The U.S. dollar would be fixed to gold, $35 an ounce, redeemable on demand, and every other major currency would be fixed to the dollar. The dollar became the anchor of the entire planet's money, and gold was the anchor beneath the dollar. For a generation, it held. It built the post-war boom, but the whole structure rested on a single assumption: that America would only ever print dollars it could back. And over the decades that followed, that assumption quietly died. Wars, spending, a growing economy. The United States put far more dollars into the world than it had gold in its vaults to honor. On paper, every one of those dollars was still a claim on American gold. In reality, the gold to satisfy them had stopped existing years before. That is the lie at the center of this story. Not a dramatic, villainous lie. An arithmetic one. There were simply more claims than there was metal, and everyone in power knew it. But here's the part that makes this dangerous. A lie like that can survive only as long as no one tests it. And by the late 1960s, the world had started testing it. Foreign governments could do the math as well as anyone. They were holding mountains of American paper, and they began to suspect, correctly, that not all of it could be turned into gold. So they started cashing in while they still could. France led the way. Under de Gaulle, the French openly questioned why America got to print the world's reserve currency, and they began systematically converting their dollars into gold, shipping the metal back across the Atlantic. Others followed, quietly at first, then with growing urgency. The world began pulling gold out of American vaults, each country reasoning that the last ones to ask would be left holding paper worth nothing. This is the crucial point. It was not a sudden crisis. It was a slow leak that had been widening for years, a run on the bank in slow motion. And by the summer of 1971, the leak had become impossible to hide. The vaults were draining toward a level where the promise wouldn't just be strained. It would shatter. In public. In front of the entire world. So Nixon gathered his people and vanished into the mountains of Maryland, and the men in that room are worth knowing by name. Because they didn't agree, there was Nixon himself, politically cornered, watching a problem decades in the making land on his desk. There was John Connally, his Treasury Secretary, brash, forceful, a Texan who reportedly summed up the whole American attitude toward the rest of the world's complaints in a single unforgettable line: that the dollar was our currency, but their problem. He wanted bold, decisive action. There was Arthur Burns, head of the Federal Reserve, deeply uneasy, worried that slamming the gold window shut would shake global confidence and stain America's word. And there was a younger man named Paul Volcker, the Treasury's expert on exactly this, who understood the machinery better than almost anyone alive and felt the weight of what they were about to undo. Volcker, by some accounts, was almost mournful about it. He grasped that they were closing a door that had anchored money for centuries, and that it would not reopen. For 2 days, behind closed doors, they argued the future of money. Confidence versus credibility. Boldness versus caution. The markets would open Monday morning, whether they were ready or not. And this is the moment everything changes. They chose Connally's path, the bold one. Close the gold window. End the promise. Cut the dollar loose from gold entirely. And then came the masterstroke of presentation. On Sunday evening, August 15th, 1971, Nixon went on national television, interrupting a popular program to reach as many people as possible, and told the American people he was acting to defend the dollar against speculators. He framed it as strength, as protection, and he reached for one specific, carefully chosen word: temporary, a temporary measure. A pause to stabilize things. Nothing permanent, nothing to fear. But here is what makes that word so heavy in hindsight. The men in that room understood the system. They knew you could not casually re-anchor the entire world's money to gold once you'd shown you were willing to walk away. They knew, or strongly suspected, that temporary meant forever. The word wasn't chosen because it was true. It was chosen because permanent sounded too dangerous to say out loud. Permanent might cause panic. Temporary kept everyone calm, and it worked. People stayed calm, because almost no one understood that the definition of money had just changed beneath their feet. And notice what this means. The gold standard didn't end because of an ideologue who hated gold or a conspiracy in the dark. It ended because of arithmetic. The same arithmetic from the start of this story, the claims that had outgrown the metal. It didn't fall to villains. It fell to math that had been ignored for too long, then wrapped in soothing language on a Sunday night so it wouldn't feel like history. Because that's how the hinges of history usually swing. Most people only recognize them long after the door has already shut. Now, the honest counterweight, because this is not a tragedy. Cutting the dollar loose from gold was not simply a catastrophe. It was a trade-off. Free of the rigid constraint of metal, governments gained powerful new tools to respond to crises, fight recessions, and steer their economies with a flexibility the gold standard never allowed. The world economy that followed grew vastly larger and more sophisticated. For all its risks, the system built that weekend has now run for over half a century and powered an era of enormous growth. Anyone who tells you 1971 was the moment everything went wrong is flattening a far more complicated truth. What changed was not that money got worse. What changed was what money is. So bring it home to the dollars in your own account right now. Before that weekend, a dollar was, ultimately, a claim on something physical, a small fixed piece of gold sitting in a vault. After that weekend, it was a claim on nothing you could hold. So what gives it value now? What replaced the gold? The answer is the most important thing to understand about modern money. Trust, confidence, collective belief. Your dollar is worth something because everyone agrees it is and acts accordingly, because we trust the institutions behind it and one another to keep honoring it. That is the strange, invisible anchor that took gold's place. Not metal. Belief. This isn't a prediction that the belief will fail. It has held for 50 years and carried the world through storms gold never could have. But it's worth knowing, clearly, what your money actually rests on now. Not a substance, but a shared agreement that has to be renewed every single day. And so we come back, one last time, to that word. Temporary. A temporary measure announced on a quiet Sunday night more than 50 years ago. Never reversed. Never intended to be. We are all still living inside the temporary, earning it, saving it, building our lives on it, a measure, now old enough to be a grandparent, still wearing the name they gave it to keep us calm. The most important change to money in modern history happened in a single weekend, in a room most people have never heard of. Hardly anyone panicked, because hardly anyone understood, and in a way none of us ever quite agreed to. We never left that weekend at all.